What is up, you beautiful, happy hustlers out there? Kerry Jack here, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day. I just wanted to do a solo episode on the Happy Hustle podcast, all about the recent documentary I watched on Netflix called Kiss the Ground. And if you guys care about the environment, even just the slightest, and want to save Pachamama, Mother Earth, you got to see this documentary. It was phenomenally well done. Woody Harrelson narrates it, and I got to say, it really struck me to the core, and I wanted to do an episode about it. I wanted to potentially just inspire one person to watch it. And so here I am making a video and podcast around this whole documentary, Kiss the Ground. And the whole premise behind it is regenerative agriculture. And I'm going to break down what that means and essentially how our soil could be the savior to combating climate change and essentially just regenerating our soil. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to kick things off with a brief video. For those of you just listening, you'll get the audio from it, but it's worth the listen. So, and watch. Here we go.
Over 1/3 of the land on Earth has been degenerated. We've broken our water cycles and systems. Our biodiversity has gone extinct at an alarming rate. Our system on our land is broken. The solution is that we can work with nature to rebuild our land, our landscapes, our soil faster than we ever thought possible. It's called regenerative agriculture. Together, we can do this.
There you have it, folks. That is just a brief intro to regenerative agriculture and a little trailer. And what I want to talk about is regenerative agriculture and just give you essentially a little bit of the backstory. So this is from kisstheground.com, and I want to read it to you guys because it's super important. Because over the last 10,000 years, agriculture has been causing degradation to land in most parts of the world, meaning over time in production, the land's ecosystem function and carrying capacity for life has diminished. So while there are exceptions, such as, certain indigenous cultures who have cultivated the land in ways that actually increase the abundance of the life and biomass, most records indicate that farming has degenerated land. And now, and this is a stunning fact, 75% of the land on Earth is deemed degraded. Each year, an area of farmable land the size of England, 30 million acres, that is crazy, 30 million acres, is lost to soil degradation. Essentially, we are turning our soil and our world into a desert. And if you look back in history, and they go through this in the doc, that is essentially how most of the civilizations actually became extinct, is because they just ruined their soil with terrible ways of agriculture. They tilled the land, which just didn't add to the overall microorganisms which you need in the soil to grow life. So the solution is regenerative agriculture, which can, in fact, change this and combat climate change. No matter what scale of farming, we can begin to use principles and practices that actually bring the land back to life, allowing it to function at its highest capacity again. And based on ancient knowledge, pioneering holistic planning and cutting-edge science, regenerative agriculture is proving that humanity has a serious solution to climate change and desertification, which is great news for all of us, especially our children and their children. And essentially, the problem of too much carbon, CO2, in the atmosphere is also part of the solution, because that is what we use to rebuild the soil. And I found this a super interesting fact, but essentially, let me get it 100% proper. Essentially, based on my notes, soil can store 60% more CO2 than plants or the atmosphere. And essentially, that is a huge reason why we need to be using our soil to pull carbon from the atmosphere. Now, I'm going to keep reading on these stats, and I hope you get some value from this. And I hope at the minimum you just watch Kiss the Ground doc. But soil is the plant microbe symbiotic relationship that makes it grow. It is the essence of life on land. So of all the food that we eat, 95% is from the soil. Without healthy soil, we have dust, desert, lack of water, and none of the hydrated landscapes that make life as we know it possible. Healthy soil is the reason that our land can be abundant with life, the reason that water can be absorbed and retained for plants to grow, that small organisms become food for larger organisms, why things can be decomposed and recomposed, the reason that springs flow, the reason that plants can absorb nutrients. The problem? We're running out of topsoil. Working with nature to rebuild topsoil is crucial to solving climate, water, and food crises. And that is essentially the essence of the documentary, Kiss the Ground, of how we have to value our soil. So even if you just help share this message with one farmer, one person with land, one person in your family, it doesn't matter if they have land, but if they do, this would be a great, documentary for them to watch. Because right now we're just seeing this complete degradation of our topsoil across the entire world, but especially you can see in our industrial farming system, which is ineffective, and it's killing our topsoil, which is essentially, killing our earth. So I'm going to keep going with some of my takeaways. And what was interesting in the documentary, they actually talked about how pesticides in our foods, hold on. Excuse me. Pesticides in our foods with industrial agriculture are actually directly linked to children and ADD, ADHD, and cancer, and many other diseases. So glyphosate, Roundup, also known as Roundup, glyphosate, and all these pesticides, which actually were created back in the early 1900s by a German scientist who also created the gas that was used in the Holocaust chambers, essentially repackaged that gas and used it as pesticides for our crops and sold it all around the world. So if you think about the source of these pesticides, they were used to kill, and they're still killing. They're killing the animals and the insects and all the microbes, but also they're killing us and our children. And it's really terrible to think about all these pesticides in our food. And the reason these farmers are using pesticides is because the soil is not healthy enough to grow this food on its own. And the documentary does a great job breaking this down. So I really highly recommend, taking it not from me, but from the documentary, which has all the science behind it. I just want to be the reporter here and just share with you some of these facts. Now, what we do want is more transpiration, which is water leaving through the plants, which ultimately increases the humidity, which then increases the rain, which helps the soil. Because currently we have an over desertification and essentially too much evaporation. This is a fun fact. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean, but 40% of our rainfall comes from the land and this smaller water cycle that comes from the earth, soils, and trees. So you have to think about right now, we need more humidity. We need more rain that then nourishes our soil to continue this cycle of life. Another takeaway, we have changed the microclimate by desertification, which is sometimes more advantageous for the land to bear crops. But right now, what we're seeing is about 2/3 of the actual soil in all of our earth is changing on a macro climate level. So many of our farmlands are just turning into deserts, turning into dust. And what is estimated by 2040, over 1 billion people will become refugees from deteriorating agriculture, ruining the land. Wow. I'm going to say that again. Estimated by 2040, over 1 billion people will become refugees from deteriorating agriculture, ruining the land. And what they break down is poor land leads to poor people. Poor people leads to social breakdown, which leads to increasing droughts and floods, and then mass immigration across borders into cities, and leading to ideal recruitment for missions, aka terrorism. And the whole thing stems from just lack of food source, and which increases the poverty. I know this is a little bit dark, but we have to think about this stuff, guys. We have to start being a part of the solution. And that's what this episode's about, is using this documentary to educate you, to educate people in your family, people in your network, people who need this message. Because if we want to save our planet from climate change and global warming, here is a perfect solution that is very feasible. It's not necessarily perfect per se, but it is feasible. And it is proposed to actually work. And I'll get into some of the drawdown method. Now, right now, agriculture is the biggest way humans actually impact our landscape and our earth. That's stunning to think about, because everyone's, our CO2 emissions from driving, or, going on airplanes and travel, and just overall recycling and our trash. But really, the biggest way we impact our actual earth is through agriculture, which makes sense. Now, the process that we want is biosequestration, taking carbon from the atmosphere and storing it into the soil, biosequestration. And this is just absorbing all that CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil. And they do a very great job with their models on the documentary. So if you want to see more about like how it actually works, you got to watch the doc. And I'm just going to keep shamelessly plugging it. And I have no affiliation to this documentary. Let it just be known. I just am a proponent of Mother Earth and trying to save it. So I want to help by sharing this message. Now, I'm going to keep going with some of my takeaways. So plants that are growing and working with the soil are a part of the solution. Not only do they help increase the oxygen, but they're also pulling carbon from the atmosphere. Now, if you can imagine the 3 biggest emitters of CO2 in the world, just take a guess who they are. I'll wait. I'm going to have a sip of my matcha tea. Any guesses? China, the United States, and India. No surprise there. And out of those 3 countries, guess how many actually signed the agreement that was recently deemed in Germany, I believe it was, all regarding topsoil and drawdown method. This international treaty where 35 countries signed, not the Paris Climate Agreement, but something different. Zero of those 3 countries, the largest emitters of CO2, actually signed the agreement, which is a damn shame. US, we got to be better than that. And China and India. So the drawdown is a method that essentially year after year reduces the CO2 in the atmosphere. Because right now we have over 1,000 gigatons of carbon already emitted sitting in our atmosphere. And it's going to take, maybe 20 years to achieve this global cooling. But over time we can with this drawdown method. And I highly urge you to just type in Google drawdown, all one word, and you'll see it. There's so many ways that we can help our soil draw down and pull this carbon. Some of it is composting, instead of, we've been composting on a low level. Now we got this big bucket, Steph and I, and we just have this huge compost that this community here in Montana picks it up and uses all of our compost, banana peels, eggshells, all sorts of fruits and vegetable scraps. This stuff can all go back into the earth to create better soil, which then just helps the land. And even in the documentary, David and Patricia Arquette actually talk about how human poo, feces, can actually help and be a part of the land and go back into the soil. And I know, Americans and humans of all countries have a poo phobia, and they talk about it a little bit, but this is true. We can use our own poo to actually help the soil. And it's very interesting, that whole process. So some of the takeaways as well, in terms of your actual, how you can help. And Jason Mraz gets on there and he talks about how you can build a food forest, regeneration. In your own backyard, you can create your own garden with regenerative agriculture and putting in your carbon so it doesn't end up in a landfill and getting burned and incinerated, which emits more CO2, but separate your food scraps and just start to compost. And there's the whole process around it. Also, if you know any farmers, this is huge, no-till drill. That soil seriously gets destroyed when you use a drill. And you've probably seen over time, the ox pulling that wooden structure with the metal slits into the ground that's just cutting our earth. And that's really what it's doing to the soil, which is essential to grow. Well, there's a better way, and you can use a no-till drill. And those are sold all over the world. So we have to start using better methods for industrial agriculture. Now, this is an interesting fact too. 1% of organic matter equals essentially 10 times the carbon. So that organic matter can pull in the CO2 from our atmosphere. And there's a bunch of different work from holistic manager Alan Saver. I highly recommend just checking out the drawdown effect. You can really do wonders by just educating yourself, educating your family, your friends on this drawdown method. And the Kiss the Ground documentary will be a great explanation as to how we can help fight climate change. So I really highly recommend checking that out. Now, there's also a really cool part in that film that is all about regenerative ranching. And the Markegard Ranch, I think I said that right, they just completely are living the dream, in my opinion. And I could see myself having something very similar, which is a regenerative ranch where everything works as a holistic ecosystem. And that is a really cool part of the doc, where it shows how it's tangible to actually be a part of the solution, how you can create your own food forest, how you can use agriculture and livestock to regenerate the earth and the pastures and the deserted lands and the deserts from our agriculture, just destroying it. We can use this livestock, cows, aka, that cows get a bad rep, but they can really help us in this situation. And the Kiss the Ground doc shows how cows can help. It's very interesting in that regard. Now, one of the biggest problems with our industrial agriculture is that the U.S. farm subsidies equal $25 billion annually, meaning the government pays over 25 billion taxpayer dollars to farmers to subsidize their crops, meaning they get a guaranteed price for their corn, for their wheat, for their soy. Even if we don't need it as a community, they're guaranteed. So they're not incentivized to be efficient with their farming because the government is giving them money. And listen, the farmer community, I know a ton of farmers. I got farmers in my family. Nothing against them. The U.S. government is really the problem here, subsidizing these farms and these crops. And they say, which is super interesting, 70% of agriculture grows corn, soy, and hay. Corn, soy, and hay, 70%. And of that corn, soy, and hay, 99% of it goes to feedlots to feed the animals that we eat. Is that not crazy? I mean, 99% of it. it's getting subsidized by the government to go to our factory farms and these feedlots, which is just steaming piles of CO2 going up into our atmosphere. So watch the doc and it'll break it down very in a better way, I'm sure, than I am. But you guys will see if you do watch it, how they break down that cycle and how that guarantee of profit from the commodity price from the US government is negatively affecting our industry of agriculture. So just to recap, food waste is a part of the answer. Composting, right? The poop has to stay in the loop, as the Arquettes say in the doc. And you have to, if you're going to eat meat, make it pasture raised, grass fed, humanely killed. Okay. If you're not going to eat meat, that's going to be even better for the environment, having that plant-based diet. And then, just be more conscious of your waste and how you emit CO2 and how you can be a part of the solution. Because right now we all need to be a part of the solution. If we're going to stop climate change, we all need to watch this kind of, documentary, educate ourselves. So if you want, I'll put a link in the show notes as well. I'll put it on the video notes. You guys got to watch this doc. Kiss the Ground. It's worth the time. It's, they do a fantastic job. They got people like Giselle Bunchkin and Tom Brady's in it, and Woody Harrelson narrates it, and Jason Mraz, as I mentioned, and a bunch of actors and activists are all just coming together for the betterment of our planet, and it's time we do as well. So I wanted to make this episode all about this documentary and my takeaways. And I really do think if you watch it, you will see how we can all become a part of the solution. And it's a pretty optimistic look at climate change. And recently, I'm sure you felt it, but it's been a lot of pessimism around climate change. Well, this shows that we can solve the problem, and here's a solution. So check out Kiss the Ground documentary on Netflix. You got to watch that. Check out The Drawdown. And then also there is the Kiss the Ground activist online training. So if you want to be a part of the solution, you want to take it to the next level, you can go to kisstheground.com and join their activist training. And you can actually see how you can help in, more ways than one by actually helping our soil, absorb carbon from the atmosphere, which then helps obviously stop climate change. So that's basically what I got for you guys. I hope you get some value from this one. And I really hope that you watch the Kiss the Ground documentary on Netflix. All right. I think I'm out. Peace and love, y'all.